Welcome to the stream. I'm shihab-eldin. It's been 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine, and today we talk to 3 young Ukrainian advocates about their work and experiences and ask them what this anniversary means to them. To get started, take a look at this video on how the war has changed what it means to be young in Ukraine.
Є моментик – синдром скіпнутої молодості. Маєш стати студентом універу, але стаєш студентом життя. Кількість нових скілів перевалила річний ліміт, і це лише початок березня. Ти можеш відкривати будь-які двері з ноги. Донат – твій найкращий подарунок на дни. Ти не знаєш більше за своїх батьків, але переконуєш їх евакуюватися від руїн. А деколи ти скіпуєш молодість, ще навіть не досягнувши її. Або починаєш плакати, коли чуєш гімн. Маєш собі цілі, пріоритети і плани, а потім хоп, а це вже не на часі. І взагалі, що вже на часі, а що до сім'ї. А потім ти кажеш, життя мене до такого не готувало. Але все одно рішаєш мільярдне питання. Тоді як? Це означає, що ми втратили нашу молодість? Ні. Це означає, що ми прокачали.
Joining us first is Zoya Miyari. Zoya, welcome to the stream. You're joining us from London, where you're a peace ambassador for One Young World. You're also a twice displaced person who advocates for refugees. So I want to start by asking you about your personal story here. I mean, I have some photos right here on my computer of your life leaving Ukraine. Could you tell us a bit about your displacement and the work you're doing for refugees?
Hello everyone, and thank you for this introduction. My name is Zoya. I am half Palestinian and half Ukrainian. For most of my life, I was living in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon in an environment that is filled with child abuse, mental illnesses, and ongoing clashes. In 2020, a huge explosion happened in the city of Beirut, killing at least 200 people. And that's when me and my family, we decided to move to Ukraine. And that was our second time moving to Ukraine, because back in 2006, we moved to Ukraine after the war between Israel and Lebanon occurred in 2006. We moved into Ukraine just before the war started in 1 year. We decided to start a new life, a more peaceful life. So we have been living in Ukraine for a whole year in a peaceful mood, in a peaceful and peace of mind. And that's when the war started around 1 year ago. And we had to escape the war for the second time in our life and becoming a refugee for the second time in my life. And that is being a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon and now a Ukrainian refugee in Switzerland.
Wow, Zoya, I mean, I can imagine that your life has been marked by loss, by displacement, by occupation so many times, and yet you seem so resilient. I want to know, what does this anniversary of the invasion mean to you personally?
This anniversary reminds me of my story, because this is not the first time that me and my family had to go through a war, had to go through so much violence. And we have been living in an environment with so much violence around us, but yet it keeps on reminding us of the resilience that we have within us. And that's why we always share our story, because our story reminds us of how humans we are, of how positive and resilient we can be. And because of my mom's positivity that has been contagious on our family and on the whole community we're living in, we remind ourselves of the resilience that we have. And we do fight, but in a more peaceful way. We fight with our words, we fight with our resistance, and that's how we survive.
And Zoya, I'm curious, you mentioned that first you were a Palestinian refugee living in Lebanon, again, a Ukrainian refugee now living in Europe. I can imagine those two identities, perhaps you were having very different experiences in terms of adapting and being welcomed. Could you just share with us a little bit about what that contrast is for you?
When I was sharing my story in Switzerland, I had been asked this question: what's my opinion and attitude regarding this? And I do feel that I'm stuck in between, because as a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon, I was denied of a lot of rights. I wasn't allowed to work, despite the fact that I graduated with my Lebanese friends, just because I didn't have the Lebanese passport. And now becoming to Switzerland, and just in 10 days, I was able to have and receive the right to work. And that really makes me wonder and feel, wow, like from one side, I had been living as a Palestinian refugee who was denied from a lot of rights, and now as a Ukrainian refugee, I was more privileged. But
Mm-hmm.
then this is something I was sharing with my Swiss family, the Schurmans, who had hosted us for 3 months and a half. We were sharing and talking about this, and we do recognize that in human psychology, the people in Europe are more compassionate to Ukrainians because
Right.
this is something just next door to them. But also, that doesn't mean that as humans, we should be helping everyone around, including Palestinians and Ukrainians.
No, and that's so well articulated. I mean, I have to also ask you, I'd be remiss, Zoya, not to ask you. It seems like the world, despite the enduring circumstances young people in Ukraine are going through, there's a lot of support for the resistance. There's support generally in the world for the resistance, the right to resist in Ukraine. As a Palestinian, I'm wondering, when you see the opposite, in many instances, true. It seems Palestinian resistance being criminalized. As an ambassador for this, one young world, what do you want the world to know about refugees in general and those who are facing occupation?
Of course. So, as refugees, I want the whole world to know that refugees are not terrorists. Refugees always resist with the power that they have. For example, if the Palestinian refugees don't have guns, they do fight with stones. And this is something I had learned as a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon. We had always fought with our power, with our resistance and our education, with the means that we were able to fight with. And now, as Ukrainian refugees, we also fight, and that's how we survive. We continue to fight, but in the peaceful way of fighting.
Most definitely. And joining this conversation, also with us is Alexandra Kamenyeva, a peer-to-peer counselor with Teenergizer, a leading mental health support network that's taken on a lot of extra work, as you can imagine, during the war. Could you tell us about what Teenergizer, am I saying that correctly? I hope so, is and what it actually, yeah, what it's actually doing and how you got involved?
Mhm. Hello. First, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me. It's very important for me to talk about Ukraine and about Teenergizer. This is a movement that united the teenagers of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So it's important for us that the rights of teenagers in the world are respected and there is no discrimination. We are working with the problem of HIV infection and violence. And I found this organization in the UNICEF Telegram channel, and I joined it in June, started my studying, and then from the August, I'm helping people.
You know, we're showing some people some of the images of what your organization is doing, and I also want to share with people more about what you've been doing, some photos that you've been posting from your social media showing your support for the troops. Look at this one here. Really, I want to know what this anniversary means to you and where you think your resistance and the work that you're doing is most impactful.
This anniversary is very difficult for me because I know what the day is tomorrow, and we don't know what to wait, what will be tomorrow, if it will be again a shooting. But for me, it's so difficult to understand that this is 1 year. But I think that the victory will be soon, and everything will be great. And for me, it's very important that I can help my country, my people, to live in this very hard situation.
And, you know, I wonder when you hear, Zoya, some of what she was saying there, Alexandra, and other young Ukrainians you've spoken to, obviously everyone has a very different experience. What's something you really want people to know about what it's been like, particularly for young people?
Yes, of course. I always say every single person has a unique story to tell, and that's why I'm working on a storytelling project with other peace ambassadors from One Young World, and we're trying to bring the stories of refugees and displaced people and migrants from all around the world to share about their stories and be their own storytellers because I do believe that the stories that we tell ourselves, for example, now the Ukrainian refugees, we all together we carry a lot of pain inside us and a lot of similar struggles, and I do believe that these struggles and all this pain could be transformed and be a peaceful weapon for all of us, and it's very important to share our story in a more powerful way because
Yeah.
I do believe that now the youth, the Ukrainians, everyone who are still there in Ukraine and everyone who managed to escape the war, I do believe that everyone is carrying a lot of pain inside them, and this pain should be seen as a power.
Uh,
This pain should fuel us to be doing a lot of positive changes for Ukraine and for the world.
And, we want to bring more young voices into this conversation from Ukraine. We have Marco, who's a 17-year-old student who talks about his hope, but also the real toll that this has taken on him personally. Take a listen.
Incredibly stressful experience overall. Because suddenly I was alone in a city that I've lived all of my life in, and I felt like I knew no one because my classmates, they were no longer here. Some of them are still in Europe. Very few came back, and I felt so isolated.
I wonder what comes to mind, Alexandra or Zoya, when you see him speaking there, and in the context of the different generations. Zoya, the different generations here, what's the experience like when you talk to your older Ukrainian brothers and sisters?
Of course, this is something that I can relate to in my family. For example, my grandpa, Diedushka, he stayed in Ukraine, and we always talk about the war and its impact. And I do believe this generation, now the generation that is leading the change and all these initiatives by the youth, by the young people, in a way, we are receiving a lot of wisdom from the older generation. And we need that. We need their power. We need their knowledge. We need this wisdom from them in order all this wisdom fuels us in a way to better create the project that we are working on. So I think that the motivation to do all what we are doing in the youth comes in a way related to the help that we are receiving from the older generation, the people who had already experienced a lot in their lives.
And, we also have a video that was sent to us by Anna. Anna is the head of Young Women Peace Builders. She talks to us about sort of the burnout that she experienced, all this work that you're doing, fighting, as you say, advocating, takes its toll as well, as we've said. Take a listen to what Anna sent us.
Evaluating the last year, I can definitely say it's been a difficult and a tiring year. Now we are facing a slowdown in our activities since people are getting tired of combining full-time jobs with full-time volunteering. And some of us are still pursuing our degree simultaneously. And talking about women in particular, we all face hours of non-paid work at home, which also affects the amount of resources we may allocate to meaningful volunteering. But I hope for the best, and I hope we elaborate new activities in the nearby future.
So, Alexandra, you heard there, I can imagine you can relate to some of those mental health challenges and just being exhausted. What can you share with us about how you stay positive and optimistic?
I think that's because I'm studying and I know how to do this. And when I'm doing my volunteer work, I try to write my ideas how to live in these difficult situations for teenagers. So I try to go for walk, read books, studying, and read news. Not all the day. I try to read them only in the morning and in the evening. Because it's very difficult when you are all the time when I read the news every hour when the war started in the first days, and for my psyche, it was very difficult.
And I saw that, Zoya, you wanted to add something, but before you do, I want to share with our audience a rave, essentially, a cleanup rave that took place in Ukraine. Take a look at this, and we'll talk about it on the other side, Zoya. Zoya, that video certainly harnesses the power that you were talking about, not just of resilience, the power of just getting up and continuing. What can you share with us? What did you want to add after Alexandra's?
Yes, I do relate to what Alexandra shared, and I truly believe that people are tired, people are exhausted, whether in Ukraine or outside Ukraine. In my community where I live in Switzerland, people want to go back home. They just miss their home because it's not easy at all to be living in a country and then out of a sudden, because of a war, because of the violence, because of people dying, they needed to go out and escape to a safer environment for their children, for the purpose of having their children in a more peaceful environment. It's not easy at all. People are tired and we do have pain inside us. But at the same time, I do see hope as well, and that's what is reflected in that video. But I also do believe that in order to do all the work that we are doing, in order to bring peace to the world, we need to bring peace to ourselves first, because everything that we do on the outside, it's directly reflected to what we have inside us. And in order for us to bring a better positive change in the world, we need to take off our mental health. And something that I also could remember and recall and reflect as well is the survival guilt. When we escaped the war in Ukraine, we did feel that we are guilty somehow because we survived. Because just few days after I escaped the war, I saw a woman and two children who were lying on the ground dead with their dog. And I could imagine, what if that was my family? What if that was me? And I think this survival guilt, in a way, it fuels all the things that we are doing, everything we are trying to achieve, in a way, because we survived for a reason. I think that's the reason of our survival, to bring the best for the Ukrainian people and for the world.
So, Zoya, I'm also curious. I mean, you know, if I'm not mistaken, a Russian family, excuse me, a Russian lady, I should say, actually helped you move from Poland to Switzerland. And there was so much kindness along the way. Is there any takeaways that you've learned throughout this experience, or some challenges you think are worth highlighting of your personal journey?
Yes. I always say that kindness is the thing that saved me and my family. And starting in Ukraine, we had a taxi driver who made sure that we arrived to the train station when we wanted to escape Ukraine. And he went back because he was a man who's above 18, below 60. He had to stay in the country and fight for our survival. And that was the first act of kindness from a man who went back to fight with the war. And then when we escaped to Poland, we were hosted by a family for four days. And we wanted to move to Switzerland. And that's when the Russian lady, Valentina, and her family, they were very kind to us. She called me and she asked for... She was sorry because of the war, because everything that was happening. But of course, she was so kind to us. We accepted her help, and she managed that we reach Switzerland in a very safe way. And then in Switzerland also, we were hosted by our Swiss family that we call right now the Schurmans. We were hosted for 3 months and a half, who gave us a lot of positive and safe space for us to express our pain. So I always say the kindness of the people is the thing that saved me and my family, because with their kindness, with their genuine act of compassion, we were able to regain all this positivity and resistance that we do have now.
And I just want to share with you, people on social media and in our YouTube chat, sending you a lot of support. This is a tweet coming in saying, the story of a young girl, Palestinian Ukrainian, Palestinian refugee. She lived in Lebanon. And then as a Ukrainian, she's living in Europe. Twice the drama and experience of being a refugee. So certainly just clarifying for our audience that you're really a voice of authority on this issue of refugees. And so that I wanted to give you some encouragement there, people agreeing with a lot of what you're saying. I'm curious, Alexandra, you know, if we think about it, it feels like the war, for me, from where I'm sitting, started just yesterday. And I'm wondering, you know, obviously it's been a year, don't misunderstand me, but I'm curious, this 1 year, we heard from Zoya, the time moves fast. What are you hoping for the future? What are you looking forward to? And yeah, what's your main hope?
I can say that I dream about the victory, and I hope that it will be this year. I am proud of my country, of my family. I'm proud of volunteers that we have, and my hope is our army, and I believe in them.
And Zoya, I want to ask you about your own hopes, but before I do, I would be remiss not to share, because you talked about that graphic image that you had to see of the family with the dog laying on the floor. And I want people to know that there are also a lot of young Ukrainians who are, you know, they were supposed to continue on in life and graduation. And there's this site called Unissued Diplomas. As you can see here, this is one of them, chronicling all of those people who were supposed to graduate but didn't. This is Yavinia. This is, you know, and it talks about, in this case, Volodymyr, what he wanted to do, you know, and it's kind of an homage to the memory of them. People weren't as lucky as you, of course, as you said, and you were able to get out. When you think of these people's lives and these people's stories, what is the way that you know best to kind of make sure their memory lives on and that this war didn't happen in vain, if you will? I mean, are you optimistic that this war will end soon?
This is something we can hope for, and it's very painful to read about those stories and to see that the people who had a lot of dreams, who had a lot of hopes for the future, these people, they were children, they were daughters, they were sons, they were fathers, they were siblings, and we should always remember their stories. And that's where I always say that's the power where the storytelling comes, because through storytelling we are able to share that pain, we are able to share those struggles. It's very important to remember in order for the history not to repeat itself. And I wanted to add about the hopes, and this is something I remember when we escaped the war last year and we were in the train going to Poland. We were in one cabin with 12 other people, 8 children and 4 adults, and we were saying goodbye to the soldiers who were left behind. And my mom, we were so worried, we were very anxious, because at any moment we were afraid that we would get bombed. And my mom said, why don't we start singing? And that's when we started to sing Ukrainian national anthem, Ukrainian folk songs. And that's where we received a lot of power. We felt all that resistance. So I do feel there is hope. I do see that we are able, with our positive attitude, to create something beautiful out of all those hope and tragedy and trauma.
And I love that you're talking about hope and being grateful nonetheless. I want to share with our audience one more voice, echoing some of what you said. Nicole, a 22-year-old student from Kiev. Take a listen.
I think I'm happy because life goes on, and you can't be ungrateful for the fact that I can sit here, that I can talk to you, that I can live on with my life. You already could have died thousands of times, but you didn't get to, thankfully. You just appreciate what you have, and you can't help but be happy about it. I can be sad because of some memories, moments in my life, but I can't say that I'm not happy.
Zoya, Alexandra, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. Best of luck on your journeys, and we'll definitely be staying in touch and following you along the way. Thank you to you at home for watching, and be sure to follow us at stream.aljazeera.com.